Thunder Grunt.
Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show that treats the final edit of a movie like it's the script. Today, we're going to talk about a movie that was not in theaters. It was on Netflix, but first, we're going to introduce ourselves. Go ahead, guys.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and full-time script consultant. My Twitter handle is @JimmyRGeorge.
I am Jamie Nash. I am a screenwriter. I wrote the book that you need to buy right now. Save the Cat writes for TV. Now on Kindle, paperback, and audio.
And it's your voice
Audible.
That's the audio.
And it's my voice.
Yeah, it's actually Jamie.
Listen to me talk sexy about midpoints and all is lost.
What a sexy voice. Right. And I'm Bob Rose. I'm at Thundergrunt Bob, and I bought Jamie's book, and let me tell you, it was worth it. I haven't listened to the audiobook, Jamie, but knowing your buttery smooth bassy voice, I just can't wait. I'm going to fall asleep to it every night.
I listened to 10 seconds of it and I was horrified. I had to turn it off. I was like, I can never listen to that again. But that's a great ad for the book. But
it was like looking at yourself audibly naked in front of the world.
Yeah. Hey, some people have listened to the audio and thought it was just fine, but I have to tell you, I turned it on for 2 seconds and I was out. And I was like, no way. I can never listen to this. This can never be, I can never listen to this.
Have you gotten feedback on it though? Like, I'm sure people have told you sound good, right?
I don't know if people have ever said I sound good, but people have listened to the audiobook and said the book was good. So
there you go.
Like it once again, let me compliment. I think Jamie has a very unique voice, and you kind of like have almost in Jim Henson Kermit territory, but not in an insulting way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's weird because I don't think I could do a Kermit impersonation.
No, it's like because it's natural.
Hello, welcome to the Muppet Show. Yeah. Our very special guest, Jimmy George.
Right.
All right. I couldn't know.
But you hover. How about this? You hover around Howard Ramis and Ray Romano. Like,
okay,
their voices. Think about their voices. I could see Jamie sitting at that table.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're here to talk about a movie called Mitchell's vs. the Machines. It was released on Netflix 2 weeks ago. Not in theaters. That's not our MO usually, right, guys?
Yeah, this is breaking format for us. This is our first direct-to-streaming movie that we're doing, which is cool.
Which is okay. I think this
opens the floodgates of possibilities.
Well, what we're going to talk about is how did this get to Netflix, but I think this would have been opening wide in theaters, right? This was a theater movie.
Probably a huge hit, too.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I wonder why, like, Army of the Dead got to... It must be contractual. Like,
sure.
Zack Snyder must have said, you must open my, movie in a few theaters, because it wasn't even that many theaters. It didn't make a ton
I think
of money.
It's for consideration for awards and other festivals or something like that. I don't actually know. I mean, Oscars, you have to play it somewhere.
Because you figured this movie would be up for Best Animated, next year.
It probably will be. It probably will be. Yeah.
So I don't know I don't know how it works anymore. It's a new world. I'm not going to explain it.
It's a new world.
Well, it is. Anyway, let's start out with first Jamie. Who wrote this shit?
Who wrote it? Michael Rianda and Jeff Rowe. And I think they're most known for Gravity Falls.
If you look at their IMDb, that is their pretty much entire career so far, is Gravity Falls. Which honestly makes a lot of sense. After I watched the movie, I was like, oh, okay. There's a lot of...
I'm not familiar with Gravity Falls, so
I'm not really either.
Tonally very similar?
It's tonally very similar. I've only seen a few episodes, but Gravity Falls, I'll say, is huge with a lot of my friends. That show is very popular.
It's kind of got an X-Files cartoony vibe. maybe what Rick and Morty is to sci-fi, it is to like
I think
Stranger Things, maybe.
Okay, cool.
Kind of like that.
One of these guys did. One of the guys responsible did work on Rick and Morty too. So it all and Disenchantment, if you remember that show on Netflix. So it kind of falls in the like animated humor category, which really makes sense for the movie itself. Yeah.
And what I saw was they pitched some stuff to Sony, the two writers. The interview I saw was with Mike Rianda. I don't know if both of them did, but he was kind of saying I was responsible. It was one of those things that I get called into a lot, but I have never been anywhere near as successful as the guy who created Gravity Falls, where it's like, send us a few ideas and we'll pick one. Of course, because they were the Gravity Falls guys, I'm sure they were like, we want to work with you.
Right.
Send us your 5 best ideas. We'll pick one. And this was one of those ideas they sent. At some point it got changed. The title got changed.
It's Connected, right?
Connected. Yeah. Which I can kind of see.
After I watched the movie, I was like, I don't know if I think I kind of like that title better, but
it's a little, it has a little more, that irony.
Yeah.
Where this is just straightforward Mitchells versus the Machines.
I get why marketing people would change it. I get why they would, because Connected is not very interesting, but it makes sense. It's different.
And for me, I feel like the Mitchells versus the Machines title is one of the reasons that I had a hard time getting into it, because it takes so long for that movie to begin.
So,
which we can get to later.
I last night, the one thing I did, look, I know we all do our different types of research. I looked up the Instagrams of the guys who wrote it for some reason. Don't ask me why. And the one dude, I think it was Jeff Rowe, he actually has a post where he talks about how he had to basically just live with the title. It's they apparently had an entire whiteboard filled with titles, and this is the one that Netflix was happy with and they were willing to settle for. So like, it's not, I think even they know the title is not exactly what they want. But,
interesting.
But I mean, when you make movies,
it's not a big deal. It's just interesting how it colors colors
it differently.
Yeah.
Connected makes way more sense. Connected makes thematically it's way better. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I looked at their TikToks last night and they did some really cool dances. Nothing about the movie, just some
dancing,
some pop and locking stuff they were doing.
That's what's important.
Live your life.
Yeah, right. But no, I mean the title thing's important. Like Jimmy just said, it really is, and the fact that they intended that, it sets a tone, right?
Yeah.
Titles are important to movies. It's part of writing.
And honestly, this wasn't one of our talking points, but usually when I look for titles, and I just had a talk with somebody about this, I'm usually looking for something that means the two different things, So that's why I like Connected.
The duality,
duality, as a kid, I remember in school, remember the old story, The Most Dangerous Game?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I remember being a kid and being blown away. I was like, oh, because the game itself is them hunting them, and the humans are also the game. And then, that's when I learned as a kid. And then ever since then, you always look for that. Like, Connected fills that little arc.
There's so many examples.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't mean you don't just get a RoboCop every now and then.
No, RoboCop 2. It's the second one, and there's a second RoboCop. It means two things.
TOO, get it?
Yeah, right. Anyway, how did this get to Netflix? We didn't really touch on that.
I mean, no surprise.
It's COVID,
this big thing called COVID hit in the year. For those of you listening in the future, in the year 2020.
That's why we're recording this over cell phones. Remotely, still.
The plague took over the movie theaters and things had to go. So apparently, like in October, they sold it to Netflix for somewhere around $112 million or something, which is probably about its cost. My gut says, maybe a little more for whatever distribution rights they sold it for.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's such a specific number. I remember. Well, maybe I'm completely wrong with it. 112 million. But just as an example, like some of the other ones I think of, I think Hamilton, before that set records when it sold for $80 million to the rights to
Disney.
Of course, Hamilton. The weird thing about Hamilton,
it's not a movie.
It probably only costs like,
Yeah.
$5 million to shoot that thing. So,
Yeah.
now this probably cost 150 million, and then they sold it. And they they'll probably get it back, and they're able to sell DVDs or whatever. There's probably some other way to make their money
this
back.
isn't our show, but I would love to understand, if I know this is like constantly debated online, but what the hell is their business model? Like Netflix. I don't understand how you buy $112 million movie, put it on your streaming service, and make that money back in revenue. Are people signing up to see Mitchell's vs. the Machines? I don't think so. I don't think that's happening. So I don't get it. There's no advertising either. So what the hell's going on?
Yeah, the money thing is fascinating.
It's really weird. Yeah.
I honestly think it's just a shareholder thing. Look, we acquired this huge movie that was going to be a blockbuster from Sony, and it's for, it fits the kids. And then we made Army of the Dead for the teenagers, and the shareholders look at that and say, wow, they're cornering the market.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's not our show. We're not talking about that stuff, but it is interesting.
And then let's talk about crypto and NFTs.
Yeah. I watched, just side note, I watched like an hour-long video about what the hell an NFT is.
I
still have no clue.
I think I understand what it is. I don't understand why it is. I think
that's right. Yeah. Anyway.
We should do this show as an NFT.
Who wants to buy Writers Blockbusters NFT?
We'll be
you can own it.
The first podcast that's NFT.
Each
Somebody else
individual
probably
episode.
Get it. Yeah.
Jamie, big question. Explain this one to me.
Okay. NFTs. Oh.
No, not NFTs. I'm talking now. Let's talk about Mitchell's vs. the Machines again.
Oh, okay.
Not non-fungible tokens.
What is this podcast?
We're all loopy. It's been a weird year.
Yeah.
Big questions. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the timeline here. So.
Okay.
Yeah. What is Jamie's talking point is, why does this have to be an animated movie?
Yes. So the reason I bring this up is I've done pitches. In fact, I pitched this movie, not this exact movie, but I've gone in. I can't tell you how many times I've pitched like the Bundys and the apocalypse happens or something.
Yeah.
Right.
I pitched this movie 100 times, not this exact movie. I'm not trying to say I pitched this movie 100 times, but I pitched Bundy's versus the Blobs or something 1,000,000 times. And one of the questions I get asked, especially obviously for animation, is why does the movie have to be animated? It's one of the key questions I get asked on animated pitches. And to be honest, sometimes I don't know. I'm like, it's extreme. It's more interesting that way. I don't know. You could make the Mitchells versus the Machines
a live action
movie.
Good, yeah.
So I was going to ask the two of you.
To me,
what do you think?
To me, from a production value standpoint, I mean, it's a lot easier, and I say easier. There's like 500 animators on the back end of the credits, but it's a lot more affordable, I think, to make it this way than if you were to try to do it live action. I think from a production standpoint, you can pull off a lot of story stuff with the animated version that you probably couldn't do as well if it were live action. If you did it live action, you'd have to give it a budget like Endgame,
I think
to pull it off.
I was going to say live action would probably at least add 50 million to 100 million on this thing, right?
Especially with COVID now.
Yeah, especially with COVID. So
yeah. No, I think you're right. I think this becomes 250 million or 350 or 300 or somewhere like that, as opposed to whatever 150, 100, whatever ballpark it was in.
Right. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, I was going to say, like, it was something like with this, when watching the movie, it also changes the actual tone if it's live action versus what it is now, because like, number one, you have all like the all the little effects and stuff that come out of like the people when they do things. That reads different when it's in live action, and I'm fine with how it reads in live action. Like Scott Pilgrim reads different than this movie, even though they both try to have kind of a similar tone, with
right
visually. So thematically, I think that stuff stands out less and ingratiates itself more into the film because it's animated. it doesn't feel as jarring. It doesn't feel like big of a deal.
The
gimmick, the quirkiness
feels more organic as an animated.
Because animation feels quirky to begin with, and this is quirky animation. It's interesting to look at.
It's in its DNA to be quirky.
To be quirky looking, right?
Yeah,
Her videos, while they're crazy and stuff, they don't stand out from her actual world as much to us.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And also, I also think that comes into play when it comes to physics. There's a lot of stuff in this movie and in several animated movies that a normal human being, if on screen in live action, you'd never believe they would survive in any way.
Yeah. That's true.
There's just stuff that happens where I'm like, if it wasn't animated, you'd be like, everyone in that should be dead.
Your suspension of disbelief changes.
Way higher.
Good.
It's way
that's
higher.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, it's way higher. Like when she's like driving that cylindrical cart up and it crashes down.
Yeah.
The fact that they all tumble around inside, I was like, I thought about this literally watching, I was like, if this was real humans, you'd be like, their necks would all be broken. They'd be dead.
Right.
But they're cartoons, so you kind of just let it go past. It just breezes past, and you're fine with it.
Yeah, your brain doesn't care. Doesn't ask questions about the animated character's survival. Yeah, that's good.
Maybe not a script thing, but it definitely changes tone.
Nah, that's a script thing.
It changes tone, yeah.
Yeah, Jamie, I wanted to ask, since we've talked about a couple times, you've had experience with animated feature filmmaking. Like, how do you think this? Like, if somebody wrote this as a spec, do you think that they'd be able to get some traction with it, or do you think this talk about that?
Yeah. So the old rule was never write an animated spec. That was the old rule. Never, ever, ever. And the reason is because everything they do is in-house. They develop, and when I say they, it's Pixar, it's Sony, it's the big companies that do these things. Their animators bring stories to the table. The only place I've ever even been able to pitch one a couple of years ago was DreamWorks. Was like they wanted to try things different, and they were listening to outside pitches and stuff like that. They had this slight window, and maybe they're still like that. But generally speaking, there's not a big market for spec animated stuff.
Okay.
It's just the way it is.
So, and that state does that remain?
I believe so.
Okay,
I would say if you really want to write animated, you're better off doing television. Because they do look at specs, animated specs, and because television pilots are generally writing samples anyway to get on the other jobs, like to get on Gravity Falls. Yeah, they have value. There's no absolute in this business. I mean, everything's a crapshoot. Everything's impossible.
Yeah.
And if you want to write a spec TV pilot, you should buy Save the Cat rights for TV. But yeah, no, I took notes on what you guys said, because always when I was pitching animated, so I've been hired a couple times to work on animated. Nothing ever got produced.
You messaged me a few times when you were writing. I remember you asked me some cartoon questions a few times. Yeah. And I pitched a few times to try to get things, and I had one that got really close. And the reason they said they didn't take it was because they didn't think it passed that test. So why should this be animated? Oh, and honestly, I bent over backwards I put in a dog that talks. I put in robots and aliens and ghosts because and they still said it. Now, keep in mind, when people pass on things, they just give you some reason. So that was their reason at the time. But I sort of believe them because it kind of got to the next level. They were really interested in the storyline and in the genre. It was a different take on like a genre that hadn't been done animated, and it got pretty far. But
what about the Amazon Studios project, For Sale by Superhero? Was that did you write that as an animated spec, or did they just make it as
So that's an interesting one. The animated. So a long time ago, Amazon had this. They optioned a script of mine that me and Pete Barnstrom wrote called "For Sale by Superhero," and they were doing these weird test movies. They would do animatics, and they released them to the public, and the public was supposed to chime in and give their advice. Now, I'm dubious whether this was a good idea. I didn't think it was a good idea. So, because animatics are hard to watch, essentially, and this one was hard to watch, and there are ways to make them better. There are ways to go in an animatic and really edit them and put sound effects and make them really fast paced. I don't think the For Sale by Superhero one did that very well. So, and I think it could have. I think it was like one more step that they needed to do.
Okay.
Anyway, that's not what you asked me. What you asked me was it animated? No, it was live action. However,
oh wow.
in the development of it, as they started to make this animatic, we did ask ourselves, maybe this should be animated. And when they hired us to rewrite it, we started skewing towards animation. A little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah. We made it more zany and more kind of the things you're saying. It was quirky in its DNA. The characters acted in sort of a more stylized manner. Things that couldn't happen in real life started, like they'd survive things or something.
Right.
That's cool. Okay. So I mean, the medium you're choosing informs the story. That's great.
Yep.
It does. It does. Yeah.
As far as this one, you think you're thinking they probably it was more like what we learned from like the Incredibles development, where it's like the animators are coming up with the story as it goes along, and then the writer sort of acts almost like a showrunner in that they're like they're weaving it all together, their original story ideas with what the animators are coming up with, and then you end up with this movie and these sequences that might not have been in the script originally, but became scripted through the development process with the animators themselves.
Absolutely. If you listen to their interview, I listened to one on Collider. They had like an hour-long interview. Lord and Miller were there because they produced it.
Yeah.
And the two director writers were there. And this one definitely went through that whole testing score. They a lot of times they just throw out there, oh yeah, we had this whole different thing, but that didn't score as well. And then we did this. And then so it was completely animatics. I think the directors did all the voices on the first animatic.
Wow. Oh man.
Wow.
They talked a lot about that without ever really taking you through the process. They just threw those things in there and you were like, oh, okay, it was one of those, which is how animation is made and generally why it used to be death to write an animated spec.
Yeah. So that's why I asked you, Jamie. I think it's a really good thing to bring up because we rarely talk about animated movies. And when we do, I like to bring it up because I get sent animated specs, right? And my job, I don't talk about the viability, like the sell. I'm not focused on selling. I'm focused on story, my consulting.
Yeah.
And so I don't critique the viability. Like I critique just the story itself and whether it resonates to like the best of the ability of the writer. But it's been really eye-opening for me as we've learned about the development of these animated movies, as we've covered them on this show, to learn time and time again how it wasn't scripted. A lot of this stuff didn't start scripted. It started in the animators' workroom, and then they brought it to the writer, and then the writer, shaped it through screenwriting. It's fascinating. I think it's good to know as a person who's like, maybe I should write an anime. These are the hurdles that you're up against. How animated movies are made now.
The animated thing I pitched after they turned it down, and it was a bummer because I really did like the idea, and I still think it's a great animated idea. My manager said, "Well, why don't you write it as a spec?" And I asked her back. I said, "Is there a market for animated specs?" She said, "Not really, I guess you're right." So I didn't do
there
it.
you go. It's validating what we're talking about here.
Honestly, what I've done, I've had a lot of my scripts, for whatever reason, my tone, especially when I write children's things, people say, I saw this as animated. They come back and say that to me. I think it's because of the way I kind of have this sitcom-y, jokey joke pattern when I do comedy and stuff. And I've taken a lot of those and turned them, I've started to think about turning them into kids' novels. I'm like, maybe that's a more viable path. Like write the novel, and then that could be.
If it reads like that, why not? If it actually comes through on the page, it would work in a book. Yeah.
So any great idea I had that should be animated, in the back of my head, I kind of write it in my novel, my middle grade novel list.
There you go.
Just put it that way.
It's good.
So,
yeah, that's awesome. We want to talk about useful technique. You guys said that a movie gets interrupted by a movie. Help me understand this one, because I'm actually asking the question right now.
Yeah,
I
sure.
want to understand what you're talking about.
So this is something I can't remember. I think I saw a tweet of this. There's two things on here I saw in tweets in the last month. So I was like, that makes a lot of sense. So the technique was this. This movie does a very on the nose version of it, like a very specific on the nose version. But somebody said, brainstorm what the movie would be if it didn't get interrupted by the genre elements of the movie. And this is more a bigger picture. So outside of Mitchell's versus the Machines,
Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead. Like it's a relationship, a breakup story. Like what would the movie be that gets interrupted? And think about that, because if you don't have that, you probably don't have the character arc and the B story and all that stuff. So I thought it was a really useful technique when you're brainstorming your idea.
I didn't know that's where you were going.
Yeah, that makes complete sense now. Okay.
So it's like a brainstorming. Okay.
And this movie has that in very on the nose way. This movie's on the nose version it's a movie about a road trip of, it's vacation.
Yeah, it's vacation.
It's vacation. Yeah.
And then that movie gets interrupted by the robots and the
So
genre element.
you have your whiteboard that is completely removed from robots. And,
That's right. That's right.
And the robot apocalypse, and you just do the family on a road trip, the dysfunctional family who can't communicate on a road trip.
Yes.
Period. That's it.
Jimmy, we're putting this in our book, the movie that gets interrupted, because you can brainstorm that movie for extra ideas to put in there.
Yes, that'll get you 100 ideas right there.
Absolutely. So,
and then you can retroactively put them in when the genre elements actually attack.
You paint them with genre paint.
Right.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
You spray that genre paint on there.
Yeah.
So I think it's a useful, simple technique. Like, okay, you're brainstorming your movie. It's going to be a zombie apocalypse. What's the movie that would happen if the zombie apocalypse didn't come? And I also think it spreads to that bigger thing we may have talked about before. I've heard Jason Blum say, I want our movie to work even if you pull out the genre element.
Yeah,
I don't totally buy that, but I think it's saying this. I think it's saying
the same thing. Yeah. He's trying to.
It's a different way to articulate what you're saying here. I like that.
That's really great.
Yeah. It's very simple. It's very simple.
It's a great way to explain something I feel like I already knew. Once again, though, I feel like this show is always like putting into words the idea that I never knew.
Yeah, that's what you do. It's a tool.
It's like
remember
congealing.
Who tweeted that, Jamie?
Yes.
Was that a zeitgeist?
I wish I did. I know I saw it online or something.
I'll find it.
The funny thing is, like, sometimes I fail at this. And so this is actually going to be something I put to use from now on. Because sometimes I'll be like, well, I want a zombie apocalypse and a guy works in an office and I'll get in there. But now knowing that the brainstorm, that movie that gets interrupted, I can put things in motion. I can put a character arc in motion. I can do all that stuff using this technique as opposed to kind of start patching it together.
And then you paint it with that zombie paint. Yes.
Exactly. So I think it's useful.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to bounce off of this because I thought you were talking about the actual gimmick in the movie of the movie within a movie, and I was like, yeah, I got to talk about this.
Oh, okay. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, talk about that. Go for it.
So we didn't really talk about our feelings about the movie, the three of us.
No, we this is a weird episode. I didn't ask. I usually ask at the beginning. I'm sorry I didn't do that.
So you guys can bounce off of me if you want to first about that. Personally, I didn't love this movie, even though I can appreciate the craft. Right? Like, I think it's really instructive, as we're going to even go deeper into. Like, there's a lot that you can learn as a writer from watching this. But I am jaded by reading amateur scripts all day, where I would say 1 out of 3 scripts I read is meta to the extreme. And I can't tell you how many times I've X'd off the line, "This isn't a movie." Like, like, as soon as I hear or see those words, I'm checked out. And this movie does it 3 times. The meta, like, Katie says, "It's just like in the movies," and her dad says, "This isn't a movie, Katie." And then when her dad is watching Katie's movie, Mark, the guy who created PAL, he looks at her dad watching the movie and crying. He's like, "Dude, come on. It's just a movie." Like, almost mocking the emotion that you feel. Like,
I didn't get that from that, but yeah, okay.
I feel like whenever a character in the story is making fun of another character feeling things, and that character, like, I never understand when characters in a movie go like, "Why are you crying? This isn't a sad moment." Like almost like pointing to the audience, especially in a meta movie. But that wasn't really what I was talking about. I wanted to talk about gimmicks. So I think this movie is a really great example of how to do a gimmick right. Because like so many times I read scripts and there's just a gimmick in there for the sake of the gimmick. It doesn't add anything to the story. I'll use an example like in Parasite, there's voiceover 4 different times. We talked about this in Parasite. And every time the voiceover is used, it gives us, it's like emotionally resonant, and it gives us information in a way that makes us feel the moment in a way that we couldn't without the voiceover. So the voiceover has meaning and purpose beyond just explaining things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Blade Runner, the voiceover version is just like Deckard going like, I was sad because this happened and I didn't want it to happen. And it's just like meaningless and serves no purpose, and it's like emotionally weightless. Katie, without her, like Katie sees the world. There's a line, I wrote it down. Her dad says, you could experience things a whole lot better without that camera. Your eyes are nature's camera, which is a character-specific perspective. And Katie says, I am experiencing it. This is how I experience things. So, like, the gimmick is a way to, like, get into the internal feelings of the character and how Katie is experiencing the situation throughout the movie. So it's, like, organic and it's motivated. And even though that's why I don't love this movie, because every time that happened I hated it, because I don't like YouTube humor, I don't like meme humor, I'm old and stuffy. I am just like Rick when it comes to like watching that YouTube video with the sock puppet, and I just like go,
well, Rick eventually liked it.
He eventually likes it and sees the value in it, but that's less about him liking it and more about him being connected with his daughter and being proud of the effort. It's not a taste thing. For me, it's a taste thing. But I think this is a great example of like when you should use a gimmick, right? Because it gets us into Katie's mind and her feelings and gives us a deeper connection. Every time it pops up, like she's like, maybe like they're in a horrible situation and she says, maybe this would be better with cat filters, and they're all like almost dying, and then cat filters pop on the screen and she's like, oh, never mind. It gives you a way to like feel specifically how Katie is like feeling this danger and dealing with this danger. So I think it's a really great one to learn from, because like if you're going to use a gimmick, make sure that it matters and it's not just like a cool way to do something.
I mean, she's literally like a YouTube filmmaker, and the whole movie is peppered with that. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
It's not useless jokes.
They make it matter time and time again. So.
Yeah.
That was all.
That's good, man.
I thought that's what you were talking about, Jamie, when you said movie that gets a
I agree.
Dual meaning.
How's this? I agree with you, Jimmy, but I liked it.
Yeah, well, you're a YouTuber, dude.
Yeah, I am. I'm also like 10 years younger in my mind than I am. To me, that stuff makes me laugh. So, and I also think this movie skews harder towards comedy than the genre.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I watched this, and at the end, I was like, that was a comedy film to me.
Yes.
It wasn't so much an adventure action picture. It was a comedy movie that had those things in it. So I read it a bit different, I guess. I
agree.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I feel like this is comedy heavy. Like I would put comedy first above the family drama.
I mean, it's going to be animated first.
Animated, yeah.
But if you took out the animated part, it's a comedy movie first.
Yeah. This isn't on the talking points, and I don't have anything to go into, but like, this is bouncing off your comedy thing. I thought this movie was a great example. Like Pal, the villain, is funny because that's like really important. Something that constantly I see in the scripts that I read. And for anyone who has never listened to an episode or heard me talk about this, I read amateur screenplays 5 days a week, like at least 40 pages a day. So it's like, it is my life. And I am constantly having to, like, during my consultations, when somebody's writing a comedy, they don't make the villain funny.
Yeah.
And so, like, that is crucial to making your comedy story work is having the villain, like, they don't have to be like likable like we've done the rooting influencers, but they have to be funny. And Pal is very funny. Like when they tell her that when the robots tell her that the Mitchells escaped, like she's like, put me down on the table so I could have a freak out. And then the cell phone,
right,
she's like, and the cell phone bounces around on the table. She's like, okay, I'm done. Like in a lesser script, you wouldn't have that, and it wouldn't the movie wouldn't work if Pal wasn't funny. So it's a good.
Totally agree, and I don't know if you guys are familiar. I don't know. I like I said, I'm not really familiar with Gravity Falls, but there is so much influence from the producers on this movie. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lord and Miller's work.
Yeah.
But like, even down to their live action stuff, there is like, this felt like they almost directed it and wrote it. Like it feels like their influence is heavy here.
It definitely feels like the Lego movies.
It feels a lot like even 21 Jump Street. 21 Jump Street has a lot of visual affectations and cutaways and stuff.
That's true.
It's just, you know what I mean? Like they're all over this, even though they don't have the credits. I don't know. It reads like that. Like,
yeah,
I'm agreeing with you. I'm just,
yeah.
And even what was the Spider-Man movie, Into the Spider-Verse?
Spider-Verse, yeah.
Even that had a certain winky sending up itself, even though it's taking itself seriously.
But I wouldn't classify Spider-Verse even remotely as a comedy.
No. But
yeah.
it definitely has a sense of humor.
It does, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's sort of not quite Deadpool, but heading in that
direction. It has
direction.
to be self-aware because it's like, connecting with so many different versions of Spider-Man over the course of like comic book history. So I mean, there is a self-awareness in that. Yeah.
But it definitely shares. The animation felt like somewhere between, like, Spider-Verse is over here, and then you've got like your more normal DreamWorks picture, and then this animation felt like it was leaning towards that, but it wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
That's not an insult.
No,
it visually looked really nice, but
yeah, absolutely.
It had its own style, which I think is like you said, it almost works with the character because it's like her style, her actual world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why. Yeah, it's organic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think I read. I'm not savvy enough to pick the stuff up while I'm watching, but it had like a watercolor palette, and it tried to do things in a 2D animation way, even though it was a 3D animated world.
I like it.
So,
yeah,
very good. I think a lot of that stuff also brings us into characters. All that stuff plays into character.
Yeah.
Jamie, you want to talk about character intro technique?
Yeah, so this was another one of those tweet things that I'm vaguely remembering. But when I watched it,
that's how the show works. Jamie just looks at Twitter, and then we just
look at Twitter.
say everything.
Let's talk about that random tweet. I can't remember who tweeted it.
No, this is one that this is another brainstorming thing that I saw, and I don't know that I agree that this has to happen every time. But when you're brainstorming your characters' intros, the person on Twitter said, whoever this mysterious person was,
poor person not getting credit,
who's writing our entire podcast. They were different people. We this is just an aggregate of tweets. It's like the TMZ show.
The TMZ of tweets.
Yeah. Screenwriting Twitter podcast.com. So what they said, what this said to do was to introduce your character doing something they love. Showing them doing something they love. And I've been looking for this since I saw that a couple months ago. And I see that it actually happens in a lot of cases. It actually goes counter to like the advice I often give, but I think both can work hand in hand. So if we take away the prologue, and we can talk about, this kind of has different prologues, and we can talk about that in a second. Maybe we should talk about that here. But if you take that away, you'll see all the characters are introed, especially in this because it's a video showing who they are, doing the thing they love. Maybe not the mom. I'm not sure what she loves though.
Her family.
She loves being a mom.
Being a mom, yeah.
And it does show her being a mom. It shows her but
the
dog,
dog,
yeah, exactly. She does that little hypnosis.
She's like, you can do it. I believe in you. That's like one of her first lines.
Right.
Perfect. Yeah.
And Katie, it shows her doing her movies. That's what she's doing.
Yeah.
She's showing you what she loves.
Dinosaurs
dinosaurs,
the kid.
the father's hanging up something on the wall about his outdoor stuff, and he's involved in that. And anyway, it's something I've noticed now looking at movies and especially looking at TV shows. And if you want to write a TV show, you should get Save the Cat rights for TV. but I've noticed it a lot in pilots lately that it starts with characters, and it could be something as simple as like the Mandalorian, to use TV, kicking ass. He's a bounty hunter, and that's what he does well.
My immediate thought was Marty McFly playing guitar.
Yep.
Marty McFly playing guitar.
The very first thing we see.
Even Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's great.
Yeah.
Great.
So it's another technique that Twitter has delivered to us that we repeat to you, or you could just check out Twitter and find all these great tidbits.
Yeah, don't even listen to our show. Just read Twitter all the time. It's fine.
Skip to Twitter. Save yourself the bad jokes and
save the cat pitches.
And the save the cat pitches. Skip to Twitter right now.
Save the Cat rights for TV.
Jamie also has a copy of a Ninja Turtles issue 2 to sell.
That's right. That's right. It's here. Oh, by the way, Secret Wars, if anybody now wants to know. I found my Secret Wars, the one where Spider-Man gets his black costume.
This is essentially Jamie's this whole show is a Craigslist ad for Jamie's basement. What is Jamie selling this week?
As I get more and more desperate for money.
But I really like that. I really like that technique. That's it's very simple, right? And how can I show my character in a scenario of doing something they love, or probably conversely doing something they are not good at but love anyway? Because there's another version of that, which is they love it but they suck at it. Or they can't do the
that's
thing
hence why I said Bill and Ted, right? It starts
exactly.
out with them badly playing guitar, right? Yeah.
So there's your yin and yang.
Marty McFly and Bill and Ted.
Right. It's the same idea, but done 2 different ways.
Also, it establishes all comic obsessions.
Mm-hmm. Well, exactly.
Like the dinosaurs is a comic obsession, right? So that establishes that right off the bat. Right. And you're also giving him character, right? Yeah,
and so to catch someone up who's never heard this episode before, Robert McKee has a comedy seminar. It's extreme. It's very good. A lot of people hate Robert McKee. I think he's awesome. And he made an observation. He did not create this. He just made an observation that in comedy, the way to create a comic engine for a character is to give them an obsession that to them is normal, but to us is like extreme. And all the comedy born out of that character is from that obsession. And since we've pointed this out like 2 years ago, every time we're watching a movie, we're finding it in multiple genres. We're finding it in horror movies. We're finding it in serious family dramas, like the one point of levity is one character's comic obsession. We're finding it over and over and over. And this movie is no different, right? Like I think his name is Aaron, the brother. He's got the dinosaur, right, Bob?
Yeah.
And Dad has three obsessions. He's the survivalist. He's got the personalized number 3 Robertson head non-slip screwdriver, and he hates technology. There's like one comedic scenario after another of his hatred of technology, and it ultimately comes.
It's not even hatred; it's his misunderstanding of.
Yeah,
he doesn't even understand it.
Yeah. He calls it He calls YouTube YubTub.
YubTub, right? Yeah, he just doesn't. To him, it's a foreign language, right?
Linda is obsessed with getting the perfect photo for Instagram to compete with the posies.
Right.
And Katie's obsession is the movie making, right? Like she makes movies even when she doesn't have a camera. She's drawing what the movie would be if her camera was actually working and showing it to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another instructive way to create comic engines for characters. This is another example of why this movie is great in its craft, I think. Personally.
No, yeah. No pushback on me there.
Maybe this would be a good time to talk about the double prologue, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, the movie, I didn't write it down. The robots, I got it. Hold on, I just didn't print it out. So the robot apocalypse doesn't actually begin for 23 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, it's just like family drama. So a lot of ways, a lot of times I'll read a script, and Jamie, I see this a lot in pilots that aren't working. Where it's the very exciting thing where the premise actually kicks into gear, like in a TV pilot, that a lot of times I won't, when I'm reading them, I won't see that until like half an hour into the pilot. And so a lot of times I'll suggest to people, why don't you put that big event up front and then catch us up, have the whole script catch us up to that exciting moment so that you can deliver on the promise of the premise up front and sort of satisfy the audience, we're going to get there and this is how we get there. And like, invest us in the situation and the problem that's going to need to be solved before actually getting there for 20 minutes. Like if you take the robot apocalypse prologue out at the front, like this movie is funny, but there's
Can I argue a little bit on that really quick?
Yeah, I want to hear pushback.
Because interesting, we talked about the title first, Connected, and you said that would actually have framed it different for you.
Yeah.
But I'd also argue that the current title, with what you're talking about too, the 20 minutes it takes, in that 20 minutes, there really is the Mitchells versus the machines. The machines just happen to be the distraction of her laptop and her cell phone and how it's actually pulling the family apart. So even when there's no robots, there are actually machines that are actually bringing family turmoil that they're fighting against.
That is a great point.
Yeah.
I definitely didn't notice that. Like it's a different version of that, and the escalation is.
And the escalation turns into actual robots.
Actual robots.
Yeah, cell phones in the movie turn into robots.
Dude, that makes me like the title more.
Okay,
that's
good,
dude. That's really good.
Yeah. So.
No, I thought this was. I like the double. So then after we get that robot prologue, like you said, Jamie, they give us a prologue that sort of tells us who each of these family characters are, but they do it in a way that's showing us like it's all backstory, right? It's not actually an event happening. It's just sort of expositional backstory, and it works, right? It's like super efficient. It's only like 3 minutes long, the family catch up, like the family backstory, and then the actual story doesn't start for 7 minutes. So there's 7 minutes of prologue before the actual story begins, which is her last night at home with her family. I think this is a great example of like, if you're trying to figure out, well, like nothing exciting happens or premise really driven, even though Bob just pointed out that it is premise driven.
I mean, he smashes her laptop.
Yeah, dude. No, you're right.
And then right after that happens is when we go to the Steve Jobs scene.
Yeah, so maybe what I'm pointing out is a moot point. It's not a good point.
No, I think there's just this movie definitely handles it with some nuance. And like we already talked about, I don't think that the title or the marketing is pointing you towards seeing that.
Yeah.
That's good. Just because I dug it out right there doesn't mean that it reads for everybody.
Really good.
But yeah,
it's measurable.
Yeah, it's nuanced and it's soft, but it works.
Yeah. One thing related to this double prologue. So when I watched this the first time and even the second time, a lot of times I feel like those flash forwards are a bit of a cheat. I mean, this was a longer movie than most animated films. It was long. It was like most of these movies are rock solid, 89 minutes plus credits. And
Toy Story is 70 minutes.
Yeah, this one was longer. And you're absolutely right. It had this slow build where the catalyst, in my opinion, and we'll get to this in a second, didn't come to like the 22-minute mark. So it's about 10 minutes late, so to speak.
Yeah.
It takes a while. Though I was never bored. And I think part of the reason I wasn't bored, I'm jumping all over the place, but part of the reason I wasn't bored was because that movie that gets interrupted had its own catalyst. So it made it feel like the story was progressing. You
mean her going to college?
Her going to college.
That's the movie that gets interrupted.
Yeah, she opens the door and dun, 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 Dad's packed up. So that's story movement. So even though I don't think that's the catalyst of this movie, that's the catalyst of the movie that gets interrupted in some ways. So it feels like things are moving.
Yeah, absolutely. There's forward progression, definitely.
No, the flash forward scene, it definitely felt a little hat on a hat, and I almost wonder if that came after the fact. Like they realized they had a 20-minute catalyst. They were like, kids are going to get bored and wonder what this movie's about. We got to put something in the beginning.
The promise
to say,
There's
Yeah.
robots
Yeah.
coming. Like, you
There's
know.
robots coming.
Yeah,
Enjoy
yeah.
the family because it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
And that works. The one thing I'd say about the next prologue, and it reminded me, I mean, I'm joking with all the TV things, but it reminded me of something in the book that I talk about that happens all the time. It happens all
Now
the
we're
time.
never going to be able to take you seriously when you talk about the book.
Yeah. It's so there's in television, in a lot of pilots, you see this thing called what I call the opening pitch. And the opening pitch is actually a lot of times it's a montage. It's a lot of times it's voiceover. And a lot of times because television pilots have to move so fast that they condense that material into some quick, snappy voiceover montagey thing, which in screenwriting is like death, right? That's like number one. Don't do a voiceover. Don't do, all this kind of stuff. Don't do a flashback to start. But in television, you see it all the time in major pilots, especially comedies and 30-minute things. And the reason, the thing I'd point out that's very instructive to this one, it's super fun in this movie. I mean, they do a great, fun job. Like, I love watching this little thing they do. And they have a total excuse for it. It's motivated. So that, and I'm talking about the second prologue, really.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I find it really instructive that if you're going to do it, if you have to do this opening pitch kind of thing, make sure it's as good as this one. Because it really has to be that good. Or otherwise, people are going to be like, don't do voiceover.
And we've talked about why it's good, right? Like, her voiceover is organic to like her making movies and documenting everything. It sets up what the characters love and their comic obsessions. It sets up the problems between them. It's using it's throwing out technique after technique after technique, and it's only like 3 minutes long.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Using all the tricks.
Using all the
all the tricks there. Yeah, it works. Where are we, guys? It's a loosey-goosey episode.
No, I think it's the Pillar Beats stuff.
Yeah, it's Pillar Beats, right?
Brainstorm, log line, and the Pillar Beats. So I thought I'd just do a super quick, version of like using, in Save the Cat. There's a thing called the way I use Save the Cat, I should say, is I use these things called the Pillar Beats. And when I teach my classes, I teach these Pillar Beats. And the Pillar Beats are, so Save the Cat outlines the beat sheet, which is kind of a roadmap, a fill in the blank sheet of like what happens. First the opening image happens, you do an opening image, then a setup happens, you set up the characters, a catalyst happens, it takes the characters into the new world. So what I use when I do Save the Cat, when I initially do it, I often use what's called the Pillar Beats. And the Pillar Beats, of the 15 Save the Cat beats, it's funny, I don't remember how many there are because I changed them. But there are there's 15 total Save the Cat beats. But you can do this in like 7 or 8 beats. You can initially brainstorm your story. And so I was going to go through the 7 or 8 beats.
Yeah, let's do it, Jamie.
And how I would brainstorm this, because I did write several Mitchell versus the Machines myself, and I probably did this technique.
Jamie, basically, they stole this from Jamie, is what we're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. I mean, quite honestly, not only when I heard this movie was coming out, every single animated pitch I've ever done is Danny McBride plays a blah, blah, blah. It's always Danny McBride. I've been pitching Danny McBride for animated for so long that I mean, like,
you were right.
Like,
he was great in this.
Yeah,
so,
I've always wanted Danny, because they always say, that was the other thing they always ask you about for animation, is they want good casting roles. They almost want you to come in with some new character type, like come in with the person, like Danny McBride's playing a kid or whatever.
That's interesting.
And, it's really important in animation. They want to animate a different type of character. Anyway, so here's how I would brainstorm. I'd start with the log line. And we've talked a lot about log lines in the past. And now log lines have basically four big elements. All log lines have a hero, a goal, an obstacle, and stakes. Okay, so the hero is trying to achieve something. There's an obstacle in the way. There's a life or death matter if they don't achieve the obstacle. So the template I use, simple template, I say don't overthink it before you write your story. So if you're coming at your story and it's, day one, you want to write about a dysfunctional family that fights robots. don't overthink it. Don't try to wordsmith. Don't
Yeah.
just make sure you nail the specificity of these things. And so my template is, and you can, this is a template that a lot of people use, so it's not unique to me in any way. But after a catalyst, and a catalyst is the thing that starts the story, and we'll talk about that in a second, a hero must overcome an obstacle to achieve a goal, or else the bad thing, the stakes will happen. Okay?
Mhm.
So just super quick off the top of my head, something like after a smart device update goes wrong and all the world's electronics turn against humanity.
Yeah.
A dysfunctional, so that's the catalyst.
That's good.
The after part.
Yeah.
A dysfunctional family, we'll just keep it simple. So this is a multi-parter. You could do a one with Katie, I suppose, but we'll say a dysfunctional family must avoid a world of machines trying to capture them to enter an override code in a company computer
Yeah.
or something. Or something
Yeah.
like that.
You could probably just
That's
say
the visual goal.
Just machines trying to have dominance over the entire planet, or something
Right.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Before they're captured and the machines rule the world. So that's the stakes. So again, catalyst, a smart device goes wrong, electronics turn against humanity, dysfunctional families, the hero, obstacles, machines are trying to capture them, rule humanity, whatever, take over the world. Goal, they're trying to stop it by entering an override code in some computer.
Yeah.
And stakes, the world will be over. Humanity will be over. The world.
Yeah. End of
Fine.
humanity.
Mhm.
So
Bam.
that's my quick off the top of my head log line. And it just, again, I'm just filling in the blank. Catalyst hero.
Mhm.
Don't worry too much about making like a fancy marketing twist or something
About
early
the
on.
words, the
The
wordplay.
The word, yeah.
Do the wordplay later. Do the wordplay after you have an awesome script. You don't even need a log line. So anyway, I take that, and then what I usually do is then I go through the pillar beats. And the pillar beats are the single scene beats of the Save the Cat beat sheet. And what they are, just again, opening image, catalyst, break into two, midpoint. I put in all is lost. Some people just skip the all is lost and go to break into three, and then closing image.
This
So if you
definitely had
can-
a definitive all is lost too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you can do 7, if you can figure out those 7 first, it'll help you. If you can just sit down and say,
Yeah.
I need to figure out these 7, then you're in good shape. And here's how I figure them out. So the first step I usually do is I start with my opening image, and I go to my, and I know we're doing this in retrospect. Their opening image could have been like a family at a breakfast table,
Mhm.
and the dad cracks a machine, and everybody's looking at their things or something. I don't know.
Yeah. No one can make eye contact.
Right.
Yeah. But I'm going to try to assume like we're thinking like the movie. So the opening image is the family in disarray and dysfunction as robots attack, and it's chaos. And then the closing image was them all on a road trip, happy together. Like they're
Yeah.
all, hey, we're cool.
Yeah.
What's funny is when I listened to that interview, they said they had a different ending that didn't show like the epilogue and stuff like that.
Oh, weird.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then when they put it in, it tested through the roof. Like they got their
Yeah.
scores went way up when they showed them all like on the road trip going away.
Yeah,
so
man.
It
You need that.
Yeah.
kind of speaks to the
That's the
before and
reward.
after. Yeah, exactly.
That's the trophy.
That's what it was all for, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what they said. They said they needed to show the reward. They needed to show how much better the family was in the end.
Yeah. That's what we. Yeah.
That's what you want to think of.
Don't
when
you guys have
first,
a term for that too? Isn't it like the New World or something? I don't.
No. New World is Act 3.
Yeah. Okay.
But you want Jamie? I'll cut you off and keep going.
No worries.
Typically, a lot of people confuse goal and reward. So,
Right.
like a lot of people, when they're coming up with this stuff, they would say the goal is for the family to be connected and happy, right? But
Mhm.
that's not the goal. That's the reward. The goal is
Right.
what actions need to be taken
To stop the
to get-
apocalypse.
to get them to be happy together. The happy together epilogue road trip is the reward. Yeah. So.
Yep. So I usually come up with the opening and closing first, and then the next two. So that kind of defines my character arc in a kind of macro
Mhm.
way in some
Mhm.
ways. Where I'm going to take, because remember, what were our 3 character arcs that I always forget?
Flat.
Confidence,
Mhm.
Oh, that was
understand more,
and work together as a team.
Work together. This movie has all of them.
All three
in a bow. So that's kind of what the opening image and the closing image show. So then I would brainstorm. I typically would brainstorm based on my log line, which I came up before I started to do this exercise. I would say, well, I already know my catalyst. It's in my log line. A smart device update goes wrong. So I just slot that in super quick. I'm done, right? Break into 2 usually also is in my log line because it's usually like if I can kind of brainstorm the bump that gets me from the catalyst to the goal. So if the goal is must avoid a world of machines trying to capture them by typing in an override code, my break into 2 might be, and I'm not even sure if this is what it is for her. Oh, I have an override code. I know what to do. And then they're on the quest, right? So it's the thing that gets us from catalyst to goal. So if I have my log line, I already have that one too. So that's done. I write it in. The midpoint usually requires some creativity. That's the next one. And usually the way I think of a midpoint is it's the logical conclusion of the goal. Like they're on a goal. It's their first win, but the win is a false victory. And this is the way I typically go. So in this case, they go to the mall, they type it in, it works, but then the download fails. So anyway, I'm sort of taking you through my process when I do these, my mental process when I do these things. Again, some people do an all is lost, some people don't. And again, that's another creative one. You have to think, what's the worst thing that can happen to this family that we're taking from disarray to functionality, friendship, whatever, family united. Yeah. And the family gets separated, makes sense. But you also want that same moment to be the furthest thing for them for their goal. So if the family gets captured, their plan is outed, the family gets separated, the family's at odds with each other, that's the all is lost. Break into 3. Break into 3 is usually whatever gets you out of the horrible thing, the new piece of information, the new thing that gets you to the next step in the new plan. I can't, sadly, I didn't, I'm doing this by my head and I can't remember what the break into 3.
There's 2 there's one for Rick, the dad. Okay. Yeah. There's one for Katie, and they both happen back to back simultaneously, and that is Katie watches the home movie and sees that her dad gave her the moose from the cabin, which reignites her, her love of her father, reminds her what she loves about her father. And then she sees the home movie of him trying to teach her how to drive, which I'll talk about again later, on his lap and repeating that mantra of stick shift lessons. And then on the dad's side, so she resolves to, I'm going to drive the car. I'm going to use his lesson here, and I'm going to drive the car into the robot complex. And then on Dad's side, he watches the YouTube video and remembers the Manchi secret weapon, and makes a plan that he's going to broadcast the movie onto the screens to sabotage, to malfunction all the robots.
Well, also, side note, what a great whiteboard that was. Just the dog. The dog being a pig or a loaf of bread. Anyway,
right. Yeah, man,
that's
awesome.
That's a great whiteboard joke.
Yeah. No, there were some really good gags in here that made me laugh out loud.
I didn't even bring up the whiteboard because it's so big. And
it's so big, and they do a lot with it. It's really good.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how I do my pillar beats initially, and then it's kind of like I can go back and brainstorm. The one thing about pillar beats I found too is if I also pre-think my characters and what their comic obsessions and what drives them and things like that, a lot of the pillar beats, and the pillar beats can change, they're things that happen to the characters. So then the other scenes to me are I more dig into my characters and figure out how they react to those horrible things. And that's what gives my characters unique personalities, unique actions, agency, all that stuff is how they uniquely react to those things.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, that's Pillar Beats.
It's great.
Very great. Thank you, Jay. And you want to learn more of that, you can purchase Save the Cat Rights for TV
or on Audible, paperback, and Kindle.
This is insane. It's great. Not insane. Okay.
Anyway, moving on.
I love it, Jamie.
It's great,
I love
Jamie.
it.
Jamie, always amazing as always. I was joking. I'm sorry. The secret weapon technique.
Okay, so Jamie and I sort of were looking for a name for this technique a while back.
I started thinking maybe we should call it the not so secret weapon.
The not so secret weapon, because I actually think that makes more sense. I actually wrote that on my paper, the not so secret weapon.
It's funny. I added it on our outline and then I erased it. So we both did the same thing.
Reading this bullet point, I just first assumed it was Chekhov's gun.
They're very similar.
Is it similar to that?
But,
Is it?
We're talking about the oxygen tank in Jaws.
Right.
The loader in Aliens. Most recently, we talked about it in Invisible Man. When she's going through the house at the very beginning trying to escape, she takes a second and stares at this mystery suit that's just sitting there that you point at the screen and do the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. There it is.
Right there it is.
Weapon,
right. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
not so secret weapon that's going
Right.
to come back 2 hours later, an hour and a half later, that she then uses to defeat him. So anyway, in this movie, it is Manchi. And it comes really late. Like I thought that was really interesting. It works as the not so secret weapon, Jamie, right? Because it's pretty obvious. You go, oh, he makes the robots malfunction and head spin and scream in pain, so that's gonna come back and they're gonna use it. But it's a great example of
are you
the
talking
not
about
so secret weapon.
The first time it shows up that he can make the robots malfunction it happens late.
Then there it is. That's the secret weapon that the characters are gonna use to win.
Let me also push back a little. I'm not trying to argue with Jimmy this entire episode, but while you're correct and that's the first time we know that the robots malfunction because of the dog, I think also they do a good job of establishing that everything that happens to the dog in the third act doesn't bother him because of the first act. They establish the dog is completely bulletproof as far as emotion and his surroundings, so that at the end it doesn't seem cruel that strapping him to the front of a car going at high speeds is anything that will worry the dog.
Right, because he's had things hit him in the head.
Yeah,
he's like, hey, what was that?
They spend time establishing their secret weapon that is able to do what it needs to do later before we even know what it does.
So it resonates.
It resonates.
Good.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah,
I also think that's the reason why this should be animated. The dog. That's always my answer. I always have.
You couldn't do that dog in live action. It just
couldn't do the dog
There's
in
no
live
way.
action.
There's no way. Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was a good example of the secret weapon technique. You have this moment in there where you set up how your thing is going to work before you actually say make it a Chekhov's gun, and like say we're going to pay this off, and it's just subtle. And I thought it worked. It's not so secret, but it's an important thing to put in there. But when you're brainstorming your story, like you can say like, okay, what's going to be the not so secret weapon?
You know why this was good too is because it came with a first instance of them being having the logical problem with the dog. I took it as just a joke.
Yes,
I didn't even read it as a secret weapon.
When you plant things as a joke, it always works better.
Mm-hmm.
That's
yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I always think like if you get stuck and you don't know what to do in the finale and it's just reading like 1, 2, 3, that's why the answer is usually on page 50 or page 40 or page 30. You always want to go back and bring something. There's two ways to do it. Either you could go and insert something back on page 40 or 30 that you're going to use on page 90 or 100.
Yeah.
Or you can go kind of mentally scour page 30, 40, 50 for something you can bring back on page 100.
Yeah, what's my secret weapon that I haven't tapped into yet? Yeah, exactly.
And it's a little bit, we talked about premise pretzels before. It's a little bit kind of the same, right? Because you have this joke about a dog who's getting mistaken for, they can't identify it because it's so ugly. And then you kind of twist that back to using that as the weapon. It's the kryptonite against the robot.
It's also it's also
how many ways can I use
realize
that dog thing?
I always talk less about instruction than you guys, which is good because we need that balance. But in this movie specifically, it also gives the dog a weird kind of arc because in the movie he's set up as completely useless in every possible way.
Yeah.
And then the dog completely by not his own nature saves the entire world.
Yeah, you can't have
he has his own arc
without the dog.
Right,
Yeah.
he has his own arc, even though it's
constructed.
completely not known to him.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
it
good,
is.
Bob.
Yeah.
That's good, Bob. So the reason that the next on the thing I'm talking over.
Oh, we
here,
got to
Bob.
talk about this.
Yeah.
I was
the
even
cool-
thinking about this when I was watching it.
What? Oh,
Me
I'll
too.
let you talk
Me too.
first.
No,
Bob.
you go. I want you to say first.
So I think there's two. So there's a lot of coincidences in this movie, and
Mhm.
I'm only going to talk about one series of them. We've talked about in the past that like generally the audience is only going to forgive one coincidence, and that's usually your hook, right? That's usually your catalyst, right, Jamie?
Mhm.
And then after that,
Yep.
if you keep using coincidences, it becomes implausible, and you stop believing it, or it becomes too easy. And then, but we've also talked about if you're telling a story that's a comedy, that sort of goes out the window, and the audience forgives all coincidence because it's supposed to be farcical, it's supposed to be zany, But in this example, I was remembering the Pixar rule, which I can't remember the woman who came up with the Pixar rules. It's not actually Pixar rules, but they're known as that,
You can Google it with the 21 rules of Pixar or something like that, right?
yeah. Which is coincidences that get you into trouble are okay, and the audience likes it. Coincidences that get you out of trouble are a cheat. So I have my big thing why I didn't love this movie besides the meta is I think the ending is a big cheat. I think even though on paper the idea that Katie's YouTube videos and the dog save the world is a cool idea, and it's premise specific, which is what you want when you're coming up with ideas. Like, what does the ending to this movie look like that you could only see in this movie? And that's Katie's movies that she made are the power that saves the world, have that much value. And the dad using the tech, that all of those things on paper, I love.
Mhm.
But okay, I want to.
It's the dad being right next to Eric Andre.
Dude, the joke.
That's the only
Yeah.
criticism I have of the movie.
Dude,
I
hate it.
I don't hate it. I'm fine. I can deal with it. I still love the movie. But if I had to make a criticism right when it ended, it was that moment. It was him in that pod being placed next to the pal guy. I forget his name. Eric Andre. That was the voice.
For me, it was
Yeah.
4 coincidences back to back. The one which I'm fine with, which is they have a dog that the robots malfunction at when they look at. That's your one coincidence.
I'm down with that.
Yeah,
though.
I'm down with that. I'm down
Yeah.
with that too. But
Yeah.
then, the dad just so happens to be in a cell where the video is playing of the dog, and Katie just so happened to make videos that star a dog that is the one thing that can stop the robots. And then the dad just so happens to have a screwdriver that is the one thing that he can use, one and only thing that he can use to escape the pod, which is a payoff. But
the screwdriver
really...
thing. Okay, I know we don't on this. Okay, on this show,
I'm being an asshole here.
No, you're not. You're not. On this show, we always say we don't fix movies. That's not what we do on this show. But okay, hear me out. When I was watching it, and I did have Jimmy. I'm getting old. I'm messing your guys' names up. I literally thought about this while watching it. I was like, how would I change this scene to make it work without that problem in my head?
Oh, God.
And it was simple. I was like, the dad is in the pod talking to himself. They've already established the pods have their own entertainment. And I was like, why isn't the pod just voice activated? He says something about his daughter with her name. And then it auto looks up her YouTube channel and starts playing. It starts activating. He watches the YouTube video and he comes to the realization completely on his own.
This movie's gonna win best Oscar for best animated screenplay, and somebody's gonna point out this podcast and listen to these assholes try to fix it.
Yeah, well, no, I'm not. But is that much different? It just takes away the coincidence, right?
What's funny is,
Bob. Yes, Bob,
I just took away the coincidence while having the same emotional payoff. And he could also realize the way to get out of there. It has you could see the actual screws.
Yeah, exactly.
I was like, he could do it on his own.
Dude.
He didn't need Eric Andre to be there to tell him these things.
I agree.
Anyway, sorry, Jamie. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah.
Now Jamie's...
Your mic's off, Jamie, I think.
I did the opposite. Yeah, what's funny is the script I wrote, that is what happened. It was much better.
Mind you, look, I agree with you, Jimmy. I don't think it ruins the movie. I don't think it does. I get why you don't like it. I actually noticed it, so
for me, it's too easy. It's like
it's easy.
I'm a passionately make it as hard as possible, and that was for me as easy as possible.
Let me argue one thing
to win.
That, as we said with comic obsessions, they happen, or coincidences, they happen in every genre, and one's acceptable in most, and in comedy, there's more. I would argue in movies geared towards kids and family, you could actually take it a slight step further than even just comedy.
Yeah,
this is a comedy and a family movie.
That's true.
And yes, that's a huge coincidence, but I think it works.
That's
because of that. For who the intended audience is, this works.
Yeah, I got
Even though I agree. I would have changed it.
I kind of wanted to ask your opinion, so I got him. So
I generally don't like coincidences. I mean, they can totally take me out of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that this one was so tongue in cheek, it's only a movie, and the fact that it happened later in it, and the screwdriver was like almost a joke, and it takes me out less because it's built up this kind of weird tone the whole way through.
Yeah.
Now, the danger of such a quirky tone is sometimes those kind of movies have less of an emotional impact on me because we're so much smarter than the movie. They're like, oh yeah, this is gonna happen.
Yeah. Right. And I wasn't trying to I say this, I wasn't trying to outsmart the situation.
Right.
It's just like it was just like so many on top of each other all at once.
Right.
It made me go like, ugh, I feel nothing now.
Well, I'll say this, that for me, the emotion of him watching the YouTube video worked completely. Regardless...
It worked for me until he said, why are you getting upset? It's just a movie.
Oh, well...
Eric Andre's character turns to him and says that, and I was like, God damn it!
Once again, my version would fix that too.
I just, I don't...
if I could just Jamie Nash over here for a minute.
My version did fix it.
I was feeling that moment until the Eric Andre character turned to him and said, "Why are you getting upset?" It's
right.
Like, don't. Why do that? Look, I don't understand.
If the movie had a misstep, I would agree with you. It's here.
The kids are feeling something right now, so make sure they don't feel it as much.
Yeah. I get you. If it had a flaw, I think you're right. It would be this, honestly. But
I'm just saying. I've pointed out all the great craft in this.
Yeah.
Script,
I don't think you're shitting on it. I get it.
Yeah.
I noticed it. But I think it works regardless. It didn't need him saying, "Why are you crying?" I agree. That could be taken out. You could even leave him in, and the coincidence of them being next to each other, and take out the dude. Why are you crying?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You could take that out, but.
Jamie's script, I'm sure, didn't have it.
Jamie's was perfect. It had no flaw.
That was great. Danny McBride would have won an Oscar for my script.
Anyway, touchstones is our last beat on here.
So we've talked about this. We haven't talked about it in a long time. So I wanted to bring it up because I think on the other side, this is another great teaching example if you're trying to learn how to use touchstones. So touchstone is a term. There's many terms for it, but I'm getting this from William Martell, his Blue Books, which if you're out there and you haven't read William Martell's Blue Book series, screenwriting, they are some of the best resources out there.
The moral premise, man. It's the best book I've ever read on writing.
That's not William Martell.
Is that not William Martell?
No.
Shit. I have a stack over here. I thought that was him.
You know what other book is really good?
Is there an audio version of that book?
Might be.
It's so a touchstone is basically something that a physical object you can use to give the audience a way to visibly measure like how a character is growing and changing, either in the negative way or the positive way, as the story unfolds and they're experiencing the events. And in this one, like this is like one of like the best touchstones I've seen that I can remember, because the moose is a touchstone for both characters. Like it's a
Mhm.
touchstone for Dad, and it's just touchstone for Katie. And then they give it like usually the touchstone doesn't get much of a story. It's just like we learn what it was, what its meaning is, and then every time the character is feeling something about the situation, they look at it and they go, "Oh, I'm sad," or "Oh, I'm happy now."
Right.
With this one, like you get like sort of a slowly unfolding reveal about what this moose is, how it was important to their relationship, and how it kept popping up in their relationship from when he was a father who built a house on his own for his family, and then they couldn't afford it anymore, so he took the piece of the house with him because of his failures, and then he gave it to we see in the home movies that he gave it to her like to help her feel safe on her first day of school. And then we see it in the very beginning when we meet it, like they are having their big fight because he broke her laptop, and she throws the moose into the box before we learn what it is. So we know it has something to do with her relationship with her dad. And we slowly, anyway, it's just a great example of a way to give us like sort of a visual barometer for like how the character is feeling. And like if you notice, like there's status updates about how the relationship is growing and changing and healing that are all based around the moose itself. Every time the moose appears on screen, it's the writer's way of like showing the audience like Katie and her dad are getting closer, like and eventually like she has the moose, and it's the way to tell the audience. She reverses her dad's line. How does a moose say "I love you"? And he says "moo," and she says it back to the family like "I have my favorite thing, don't worry." And the whole family moves together, and it's a great teaching example for touchstones. So I may not like the coincidences, but I love the touchstone.
I actually didn't even read at the beginning of the movie. I was like, what is this random ass moose thing happening? And then the movie sold it to me. I was kind of like questioning it at the beginning, Jimmy.
Oh wow,
yeah,
okay.
I was like, what's this moose? I for some reason it didn't read to me at the beginning. I was like, outdoors. It had something to do with his outdoors, love of outdoors and stuff. But
it's a really unique approach, because typically what you learn the backstory when you're shown the item right away.
Yeah.
You don't usually have like a mystery around what is this item.
Right.
You usually get like, for instance, Goose's dog tags is the one like a lot of people make fun of Top Gun, but I use this as my go, and I actually think it's in William Martell's book, which is probably why I use it. Where I learned this technique is when in Top Gun, Tom Cruise and Anthony Edwards are co-pilots, and Anthony Edwards has dog tags that say Goose, and they have a traumatic experience happen, and he gets Goose's dog tags, and every time he's feeling scared in the air, he says, "Talk to me, Goose." And then we get to watch over the course of the story as Tom Cruise grows and changes as a character. And then in the end, he throws the dog tags into the ocean, and that signifies to the audience that he's healed now. He's overcome that trauma. So yeah, it's just great.
It's good stuff. That's a good example. Yeah. Top Gun's fine. Don't worry.
We'll be doing Top Gun 2 one day.
Yeah, we will be.
Dude, Chris McQuarrie, I got good feelings.
We've done one of his movies already, so
yeah,
like we're already he's a friend of the show. I think that's everything we got, guys, isn't it? Yeah. There's anything left to say on Mitchell's vs. Machines, aka Connected?
Yeah. Nah.
No, I think that's
we haven't done in a while. What have you learned? Did you guys learn? What did you guys learn? I like doing that. Dead silence.
I'm thinking because
the last 2 hours were what I learned.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
You know what? This is one of those movies. Like when we do a Pixar, we did The Incredibles. I feel like these movies are so well made, and it's kind of like they are themselves the lesson. You could watch most of these animated movies, and they're like,
and there's the animated movies.
You don't spend 5 years making these things with an entire team that knows exactly what they're doing, not to come out with a lesson when you're watching it. You know what I mean? The whole thing is craft.
It's really very rare that these things are ever a train wreck, because they spend so much time, slaving over every detail and testing it and talking about it, and they really do spend a lot of time on everything.
For me, that touchstone that I just talked about, I think was the most instructive thing. I can't think of any movie, and I'm sure somebody is going to dig it up and be like, what about this classic that you forgot? But I can't think of a movie where an object was shared by two characters and that object was used as a touchstone for both characters simultaneously through the entire story and was given its own mini story to help give you a deeper connection to the relationship. So the touchstone was like very instructive for me in this one.
That makes sense. I didn't think about I didn't think about the moose as much as you did, apparently.
I think most of my lessons learned came from Twitter this month.
And all my lessons came from Save the Cat Rights for TV, available on Amazon Prime.
As they should.
Anyway, I think we pretty much said everything we can on this movie. Yeah, it's on Netflix now. I don't think it's going to be off Netflix anytime soon.
Yeah, so this is going to be an evergreen episode.
It's an evergreen episode, right? Until civilization crumbles or Netflix gets bought by Disney and all gets absorbed into Disney Plus. But yeah, I think we've plugged everything we're going to plug.
Yeah.
If anyone listening is interested, I'm marrying everything on YouTube now. youtube.com/Thundergun podcast, and obviously you can find the podcast on any of the major apps. I don't know what people listen to anymore. Spotify, something. I don't know. It's on there.
I have one thing to plug.
Go for it.
It's still in Redbox, so I think I should plug it. A movie that, like, one of the first scripts I consulted on when I started my Script Butcher consulting business like 5 years ago. They eventually made it into a feature film, and it's out there. It's on iTunes. It's in Redbox right now, so that's really exciting. It's called I Am Lisa. It's a female centric werewolf revenge story. So
nice.
Check it out.
Jamie, outside of your book, do you have any?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I just got a copy of the 44 Rules of Amateur Sleuthing, the hardback.
Nice.
So you can get it in hardback now if you want. That's cool. a long-term copy. This is brand new that it's in hardback. So you can get it.
I'm gonna get that, Jamie.
Yeah,
it's actually really nice. I wasn't sure how nice it would be, and it's really I'm loving it. I just got it while we were talking. The mail came. My wife.
So, like, hardback means it's sold enough to justify that, right? Or is that?
Hardback
I don't know what that means.
No, hardback means Amazon now has a new button you can press and say, make it hardback. And there's some work you have to do around it, but I actually really like it. It's really nice. So awesome. But the Amazon hardback program is in beta, and I was allowed to take advantage of the beta, and I did.
Very cool.
Yep.
So everybody buy all of Jamie's books.
That's right.
Watch Jimmy's movie, and thank you for listening. Seriously.
Yeah, thanks for listening to all our sales pitches.
Yeah. We'll be back next time with everything
more
in
commercials.
My kitchen. Yeah, like I'm trying to get rid of some appliances here, so we'll have deals. Come on back. All right, guys. All right. See you guys later.
Listening. See you later.
Bye.
You have just listened to Writer's Blockbusters, a screenwriting podcast featuring two professionals and another guy. Available only on Thundergrunt.